Are you among America's simple-minded, clueless, entertainment addicted, ignorant, tuned out? Then ask yourself this: why in the world does Obama and the Democrat Party want to give foreign immigrants, felons and criminals, people with multiple addresses, non-residents, non-U.S. citizens, and even dead people the right to vote? Why does the Democrat Party really hate voter ID laws that require a person to show their photo ID before voting? Because they cheat and lie to steal elections. Why in the world do Democrats, liberals talk down to us blacks and Hispanics? Because they're all a bunch of racists. You see, Democrat leaders assume we are too stupid and too dependent on government to manage our own money, to raise our own children, and to feed ourselves, and now to vote by ourselves. Now get ready. Liberate your mind. The day we in America loses our fair elections and its citizens say and do nothing about it, we all will be ruled by dictators, criminals, and will have no justice at all.
News alert on the battle over voter fraud in Florida. The Department of Justice announcing a short time ago it's planning to sue the state within 24 to 48 hours. Florida now locked in a major dispute with the Justice Department over its voter purge program, making sure no illegal immigrants are on its rolls. The feds claim they're violating the law, but Governor Scott argues it's his job to defend the right of American citizens to elect their leaders. Listen.
This is not a partisan issue. This is Republican, Democrat, Independent. This is protecting the rights of U.S. citizens and not diluting their vote by non-U.S. citizens. When non-U.S. citizens register to vote and vote, it is illegal. It's a crime. When non-U.S. citizens register to vote and vote, it is illegal. It's a crime. When non-U.S. citizens register to vote and vote, it is illegal. It's a crime. It shouldn't be happening in our great state.
All right, when we started digging on this, we found out the DOJ is already suing more than a third of the states, or has something pending against them, all in connection to changes over their voter laws. Check out the map to who's on the right side here. We're going to be joined now by David Rifkin. He is constitutional law attorney and former White House counsel. Also, Julian Epstein, Democratic campaign consultant and former legal counsel for the House Judiciary Committee. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Good to be with you.
All right, David, the feds say that Florida is breaking the law. Is it?
No, the arguments are entirely specious. DOJ is using two statutory arguments. Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act that requires plea clearance. By the way, not for the whole Florida, Shannon, but for 5 counties in case of change in voting rules or procedures. There's clear Supreme Court precedent that removing non-citizens from voting rolls is not, repeat, not change in rules or procedures. They're also talking about Section 8 of something commonly known as the Motor Voter Act. Section 8, however, deals with removal of individuals who are previously eligible to vote and are no longer eligible primarily because they moved out of state. Once again, it has nothing to do with non-citizens. Their arguments are utterly political, legally incoherent. And by the way, apropos what Governor Scott had to say, under the existing federal law, Section 303A, if I'm not mistaken, of Help America Vote Act of 2002, the state is not only allowed, but indeed directed to ensure the accuracy of its voter rolls by comparing it with other databases under state's control, including the databases containing driver license registration. So this is a state that's doing what it's supposed to do and is not violating any federal law.
Today, the Attorney General, testifying on a different matter before the Senate Judiciary Committee, said that the DOJ had basically done everything it could to try to work something out with Florida, and it was left with no option basically but to sue. Any chance you think that they work out a last-minute deal here?
I don't think so, given the position of his department, to be clear. What DOJ is doing, and I don't care what state commissioners said what. As a matter of law, the interpretation of Section 5 and Section 8 is incoherent, and they don't acknowledge at all the Help America Vote Act that I referenced. But more importantly than that, this is a department that is utterly politicized, that is only doing this for political reasons. They have no hope of prevailing, and it's truly deplorable. I've never seen, you really have to go back to the Nixon days to see that level of politicization in the Justice Department, and nobody seems to care that much except for Fox and a few other outlets.
Well, you know, David is, let me just respond to that. David is a superb constitutional lawyer. He is, I think, prone to flowery language sometimes. The statute, I think, is relatively clear, David. It says, the National Voter Registration Act, that you should not do voter purges within 90 days of an election. We are within 90 days of the election. Florida could have done it well before this period.
Julian.
The reason for it, it's not incoherent at all. The reason for it is because you do not give people that are purged an opportunity, you do not give them due process to challenge it. You create all kinds of confusion, and the impact here is potentially very, very discriminatory.
Julian, I want to bring up something that's important to note here as well. For months, the state of Florida has been asking the Department of Homeland Security for access to citizenship information that would help us, help Florida to appropriately call the list, don't knock out a World War II veteran, you know, keeping those who are legitimately here or legitimately citizens. It's now suing the DHS in dueling lawsuits here because it says it was never given access to information it rightfully needs so that it can appropriately weed people out and not weed others out. What's your response?
The response at first, it's not a Department of Homeland Security, it's a Department of Health and Human Services that runs the program. It's called the SAVE program. The program has limited utility. It can tell you whether a person had become naturalized, not whether someone was eligible to vote or not. It simply tells you whether someone had become naturalized during a period of time. And secondly, as the Department of Justice has pointed out, Florida has utterly failed to provide the necessary information so that they could match both sets of records. So Florida, if they wanted to participate in the SAVE program the way other states have participated in, all they needed to do was provide the necessary identifiers that are required under the plan, and Florida failed to do that.
All right, unless the state of Florida is confused, it is suing the Department of Homeland Security in relation to that program. So that's the agency it's suing.
Let me just say one thing.
David,
not
only
DOJ is wrong about Section 5 and Section 8. I've not heard Julian say anything about federal law, Section 303, that specifically requires direct states to ensure the accuracy of voter rolls by comparing it with other databases. Under Julian's view of the world and DOJ's, that command is meaningless.
I feared that the way he would rig the election, steal the election really, was through illegal aliens. I feared that. I said it to you at least 9 months ago, then 6 months ago. It's as though my prediction is coming true. And I want to talk about it. Well, here's a little fact for you. It came and went real quickly. This is why he's sure he's going to win the election. This is why he whispered to Medvedev with the closed mic, when I'm reelected. This is why he said when I'm reelected again the other day. Did you hear that the Obama administration has sold the rights to processing our election results to a private company? That this critical component of a free election, the transparent tabulation of votes, will now be handled not by individual precincts but by a company over which we will have little control. Did you know about that? SOE, a U.S. elections results processing company, which has handled processing election results from over 500 American jurisdictions, has typically provided prompt reporting of precinct-level results. However, SOE was recently acquired by SCYTL, a vote processing company based in Spain. In Spain. And this compromises the process enormously. Instead of producing election results trackable at the precinct level, votes will be transmitted to a central server where they will be counted. The problem is that once the votes are merged, it will be impossible to go back and check their integrity at the local level. It is very likely that this is the final step in Barack Obama's corruption of the voting process. It has the promise of enabling him and his cohorts to control the outcomes of federal elections with no accountability. On top of that, it's one more step toward the formation of a global government, one of the aims of George Soros, whose puppet currently occupies the White House. Did you hear what I said? Do you think I made this up? Who owns SCYTL, a vote processing company based in Spain? There's not one American person on the board of directors of this company that controls the outcome of our voting. How is that possible? How could SOE, a U.S. elections results company, be permitted to sell it to a holding company in Europe? Who permitted this? How it is that our votes could be processed by a Spanish holding company Where were the Republicans when this occurred? Why has there been no investigation by the Federal Elections Commission? Why are the American people in the dark about this? How do you live in a country where you don't even know if your vote is even counted properly? Why is it that the Associated Press doesn't even cover this story? I have 500 questions. Do you have even one answer? Fresno, California. David, you want to call about the vote rigging and the company that controls the counting of the votes. David, what do you know?
Yes, sir, Mike. All right, when I heard you ask the question, I went ahead and did some Google searches, and it turns out the CEO of SCYTL, the former CEO of GlobalNet, was a major Obama contributor to his presidential campaign. Apparently, he contributed the maximum allowable amount to Obama's inauguration campaign.
Oh, I see.
2 election supervisors take action tonight after an NBC2 investigation uncovers flawed record-keeping and human error allowing people who are not citizens of the United States to vote.
NBC2 investigator Andy Parati has been working on this story now for more than 2 months.
He joins us live from the Lee County Elections Center. Andy?
Well, Lindsay, we don't know how widespread this problem is because elections offices don't keep track of where non-citizens live. So we decided to do something that they never tried to do before, and we found them on our own. Have you voted before?
Right. I vote every year.
Hanako Danette is not a U.S. citizen, yet the Cape Coral resident is registered to vote. Do you know that you're not supposed to vote if you're not a U.S. citizen? NBC2 found Danette after reviewing her jury excusal form. She told the clerk of court she couldn't serve because she wasn't a U.S. citizen. But we found her name and nearly 100 others like her in the database of Florida registered voters. You have no idea why you're registered to vote?
I have no idea. I mean, how am I supposed to know? Go driver's license facilities or anything. I don't know.
This Naples woman didn't want to show her face. While she doesn't know how she was registered, she does know how to vote. Records show she voted 6 times in elections dating back 11 years.
I know you cannot vote before you become a citizen, so I never tried to do anything like that.
Samuel Lincoln is not a U.S. citizen either. The Jamaican national says he doesn't know how he ended up registered to vote.
So this is all a big mistake.
So that's their mistake, that's not mine.
But we obtained a copy of his 2007 voter registration application. It's clearly marked U.S. citizen.
And that is under oath, that document. They're attesting that it is in fact true. And by falsifying it, it's a 3rd-degree felony.
County supervisors of elections tell me they have no way to verify citizenship. Under the 1992 motor voter law, they're not required to ask for proof.
We have no policing authority. We don't have any way of bouncing that information off of any other database that would give us that information.
Does that need to change?
I think it needs to be looked at.
Until that happens, the only way supervisors of elections can investigate voter fraud is if they get a tip.
It looks like these individuals lied on your documents.
So that's what our list became. After showing them nearly 100 names we compiled, both elections offices sent letters to each voter asking them to verify citizenship.
It could be very serious. It could change the whole complexion of an election.
It's important to note that we don't know whether they were here legally or not, only that they're not U.S. citizens. It takes 30 days. They have 30 days to respond to those letters to verify their citizenship. If they don't, they'll be taken off the voter rolls. Back to you.
Andy, quick question for you. We know in Florida all too well that it can only take 1 vote and that can make a difference. But are the supervisors changing their policies to make sure that the people who are not allowed to vote, that they don't vote?
Based on our investigation, both elections offices plan to request jury excusal forms from clerk of courts every single time they get one that says not U.S. citizen. They'll basically do what we did. They'll take those names and they'll compare those names with people registered to vote in Florida. Live in Fort Myers, Andy Parati, NBC.
Voter fraud scandal out of Indiana. You have 4 people, including the Democratic chairman, charged with faking signatures on petitions. Those petitions put President Obama on the Democratic ballot in 2008. Fox News broke that story last fall, and it all started with a young man who went to authorities. With an update now, Eric Shawn is joining us live from our newsroom. Eric?
Hi, Janet. Well, he told prosecutors he was ordered to forge presidential petitions for Barack Obama, illegally faking the names and signatures of unsuspecting voters to put the then Illinois senator on the presidential primary ballot. But according to court papers, he had a change of heart and came clean. Now his lawyer calls him a hero. That's how the stunning case in South Bend, Indiana started. And now the revelations from alleged whistleblower, 26-year-old Lucas Burkett, have led to criminal felony charges. 4 Democratic officials and party operatives expected in court within the next hour, charged in a multiple election fraud felony case for allegedly faking the petitions that put both the president and Hillary Clinton on the ballot there in 2008. The longtime Democratic County Chairman Butch Morgan accused of being the mastermind behind the forgery scheme. The Democratic Voter Registration Board supervisor, Pam Burnett, and Democratic Board worker Beverly Shelton also charged, as was Democratic volunteer and former board worker Dustin Blythe. Blythe allegedly forged signatures on President Obama's petitions, but when we caught up with him last November, he refused to comment about it. Can you talk to us about the petitions?
No, I'm sorry. I don't have anything to say.
Did you forge any signatures?
I don't have anything to say.
Did you fake any petitions at all?
I don't have anything to say.
Well, investigators say they did find forgeries on 22 Obama and Clinton petitions. Those sheets list 10 names each. Voters told us they never signed.
I did not sign for Barack Obama.
So someone forged this?
That's correct. That's not my signature. I did not sign for Barack Obama.
Well, prosecutors say the forgery assignments are actually split. One person handling Mrs. Clinton, another then Senator Obama, and Blythe allegedly handling John Edwards. But when Lucas Burkett quit, they say Blythe was then assigned his forgery duty for the candidate who would eventually become president of the United States. And if you suspect voter fraud where you live or election problems, we want to know about it. Voter fraud at foxnews.com is our address. Jana?
Mike, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, how you doing, Chris?
Hey, I'm good.
I'm trying to be quiet. I'm actually on a bus. I'm from Michigan.
Uh-huh.
And I'm actually on a bus. 3 other buses following us, and we're on our way to Wisconsin. I'm not even a registered Democrat.
Ed, what are you doing? What are you going there for?
I'm going to vote for Scott Walker.
You're going to Michigan? You're going to Wisconsin from Michigan?
We're going to Wisconsin. We're from Michigan.
Uh-huh.
It's 4 buses total.
Uh-huh.
We're going to Wisconsin, but we're from Michigan, right outside of Detroit.
Uh-huh.
And they got 4 buses up there, Chris. I don't know if they got other buses coming from other directions, but it's 4 buses. And we're going to Wisconsin to vote.
And you're going to Wisconsin to vote for
the governor.
For Scott Walker.
I'm voting for Scott Walker. I know most of these people aren't, but I'm actually
Now wait a minute. Now wait just a minute. You're going. You're on a bus in a convoy of 4 buses. You left the Detroit area. The convoy of 4 buses is headed to Wisconsin to vote. Now, who organized this little foray?
Chris, I'm not even sure. I just heard about it and I jumped on the bus. I'm talking low to you because I guarantee if these people knew my intentions, man, I'd be killed on that.
You're on a bus full of people going from Michigan to Wisconsin, and you believe that most of the people on the bus, other than yourself, you believe that all the people on the bus, other than yourself, are going there to vote for Tom Barrett.
Most of them are Democrat. It's a Democrat union. It's actually a Democrat union. It's organized by Democrats, but I'm not going there to vote for the Democrat. I'm going there to vote for Scott Walker. Once I heard about it, I figured, hey, this is an opportunity to sabotage what they always do to Republicans.
Now, but you're all alone on this bus, whispering into your cell phone.
Well, I don't know if there's other people with my intentions, but I know most of these people, their intentions are to go vote for Democrats. I mean, now I know why people vote for Democrats.
Uh-huh.
Man, they give out all kind of free stuff, Chris.
Well, let me. Yes, yeah, that's their plan. Now, let me ask you this, because this is a very interesting and very curious telephone call. How are you listening to the show?
No, I drive tractor trailer. Remember, I told you that. I drive tractor trailer. I know your number. I'm always in D.C., Virginia, Arlington area. I'm always in that area. I deliver out near 27, right out there near the Pentagon.
Uh-huh.
And
all right, and you, how did you hear about this convoy of buses going to Wisconsin?
Because I live in the Michigan area. I live in Detroit area. I live right outside of Detroit.
But how did you personally get wind of this convoy?
Let's just say my uncle works for a union out here at the Chrysler plant.
And is it a United Auto Workers convoy?
They're not really like labeling who they are, but it is a auto union. It is a union, but they're not labeling exactly who they are.
Okay. And these 4 buses, do they have any obvious markings on them? Are they Greyhound buses? Are they marked in some way?
They're just charter buses.
They're just charter buses.
They're big black with gray lines on the side charter buses.
All right, but what you're telling me is that the unions in Michigan have organized a bus convoy, and you're riding in that bus convoy, and they're bringing Michigan residents to Wisconsin in order to vote illegally for Tom Barrett.
Well, when the Democrats do it, it's not illegal, Chris. I mean, they treat us to lunch. I mean,
and you get lunch.
There's a lot of freebies on this. There's a lot of freebies with this deal. A lot of freebies.
And the unions are busing people in from Michigan to vote in Wisconsin, and everybody knows that they're there to vote illegally.
That's their intention. That's exactly their intention.
And have they told you? Have they told you where you're going? Are you going to Milwaukee, or are you going to Kenosha? Do you know where you're going?
I'm not really sure. I don't think we're going all the way into Milwaukee. I'm not sure if we're going that far in, but I could find out what town, and I could call you right back.
I would. In fact, I want to ask you to hang on, because if it's all right with you, I'd like to get your phone number and call you later on. Not on the radio, but off the radio. I'd like to get your phone number and call you later.
All right, and I also got a camera, so I would love to put this on YouTube, but man, I know how vicious Democrats are, and I would hate for them to track me down on my website or this or that, and then come after me, start sending my bill collectors that I'm dodging, because certain bill collectors that I am dodging, but they'll start getting all vicious and stuff like that.
All right. Now, do you think that there are more buses, more than the 4 buses in your convoy?
If there are 4 buses where I'm from, then I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's more.
And are you going to go in on I-94? Do you know?
Well, when we left from Michigan, right now we're on 90.
All right.
Right now we're on 90.
So you haven't hit Illinois yet. Where are you? Still in Michigan now? You're in Indiana.
Let me say, we're in Indiana.
All right, and so you're going to take 94 or 294. 94 is free, but you go through the city. 294, I think, is the tollway. You got to pay a little, but hey, it's somebody else's money. Who cares? All right, listen. What else? What else do I need to know? How many people on these buses? Like 50, 60 people on each bus?
They're full. Imagine a Greyhound-sized bus, full to capacity.
All right, and where did this convoy leave from?
Right outside of Detroit.
Was it at a bus station or a union shop?
At a park.
At a park. The rendezvous was at a park this morning, and everybody showed up, and you're being promised lunch, and you're being taken to Wisconsin to vote. The unions are organizing it, and there's every reason to believe that this is going on in other places too, and they're busing people in. Now, and the reason is to vote, not to go do something else.
No, it's just a vote. Just a vote. I'm sure once they get what they want from these folks, they'll take them back home, and they'll never see them again.
All right, Mike. Listen, I want to ask you to hold on for a minute, okay? Because this is all very curious, and I'm still curious. How did you know I was talking about this right now?
Chris, I know you always talk about stuff like this, but I don't know that you're talking about it. I'm just actually on the bus, and I figured, hey, I'm gonna call Chris Plant.
Go in. Okay. All right. Look, I just hang on the phone there. Don't hang up. We're gonna go to commercial. I'm gonna pick up with you off the air, and get some contact information so I can keep up with your travels today.
Okay.
All right. Mm-hmm. All right, Mike on a bus. Hang in there for a minute. Well, that was unexpected. You know, Fox News yesterday had a story about Democrats going door to door getting people to sign stuff, and this guy signed a petition, and then it turned out his signature was used to get an absentee ballot sent to an address where he doesn't live. And then the ballot was cast in his name, but we don't know for whom the ballot was cast just yet. All right, well, that was a very interesting call. And we have heard from Mike before. Why is this recall election in Wisconsin of national import? Why are we all focused on this?
And my vote's been disenfranchised in the state of Wisconsin. And you know what? So is yours. Because in the state of Wisconsin, it is an undue burden to expect our government protect the integrity of elections. That is an undue burden on the cheaters, people. We'll talk about voter ID. The judge in Dane County, Judge Flanagan, signed a recall petition, by the way, essentially rejected every single argument made by the United States Supreme Court in the United States Supreme Court's rejection of a challenge to voter ID. Because Judge Flanagan knows better. We will talk about that coming up on the program. It's not going to be in place for November. And why I didn't open up my Wheeler report and my WisPolitics report and not see a pile full of enraged press releases at a bare minimum from Republicans is beyond me. So we're going to talk a lot about voter ID here. Voters who are required to show a photo ID at the polls experience a substantial impairment of the right to vote guaranteed by the state constitution. That, says Judge David Flanagan, Madison, in his decision to reject the state's voter ID law. He says that the cost imposed and the difficulty of obtaining documents necessary for photo ID renders a substantial burden which falls most heavily upon low-income individuals, he said. He rejected the data presented by a demographer who looked at the state of Wisconsin and said that nearly all eligible voters had a photo ID and instead accepted an estimate made by a political science professor at the UW who said he didn't happen to agree with that data presented and suggested that the number of disenfranchised voters could be 300,000. Flanagan also said that the state of Wisconsin's voter ID law appears, but he doesn't know, appears to be the most restrictive in the country. It's not, by the way. It's identical to Michigan. But it appeared to Judge Flanagan to be the most restrictive in the country. Why? Because that was what the liberal lawyers said it was, the most restrictive in the country. In fact, it is substantially similar to a number of voter ID laws that have been upheld, including Indiana's voter ID law, which was upheld by the United States Supreme Court. It is an undue burden on cheaters to protect my vote, ladies and gentlemen. The integrity of my vote is irrelevant in the state of Wisconsin because the liberals argued that protecting the integrity of my vote is an undue burden on the cheaters in elections. If my vote is canceled out, that's okay. That's the price we pay so that we don't find ourselves accused of disenfranchising voters we're not disenfranchising. I wouldn't want to be accused of that. I would rather have my vote canceled out. I would rather have a bunch of union thugs bust in from the state of Ohio into the city of Madison, Wisconsin to gin up a turnout level of 119% and then get in their buses and go back to Ohio. I wouldn't want to be accused of disenfranchising their votes by demanding mine be protected. God forbid that a free photo ID in the state of Wisconsin is an undue burden on the cheaters being bussed in from out of state.
New evidence tonight that the so-called community left-wing activist group Acorn is involved in widespread voter registration fraud. In point of fact, Acorn is a left-wing special interest group that's been under investigation for literally years in various parts of the country for voter fraud and embezzlement. Tonight, the Lake County, Indiana Board of Elections says Acorn submitted literally thousands of fraudulent voter registration cards over the past few days alone. Drew Griffin has been investigating Acorn, is joining us now from our Chicago Bureau with the very latest for us. Drew?
Lou, let me just set this up a little bit. Lake County is a very Democratic county in a Republican state of Indiana. Barack Obama wants to turn Indiana this election, and if it turns his way, it'll be largely because of the voters in Lake County who turn out, again, heavily Democratic. Acorn, who supports Barack Obama in this presidential campaign, went out and tried to register as many new voters in Lake County as they possibly could. The deadline was October 6th. They came in with 5,000 new applications, and when the registrations office began going through them, they found a pattern. Every single one of them was fraudulent.
A lot of them? 50%. We had close to 5,000 total from Acorn, and so far we have identified about 2,100.
So roughly half of them
Roughly half.
are bad.
Correct.
Registered to a dead person, registered as a person who lives at a fast food
Yes.
shop,
Yes.
or just all of them amazingly in the same hand.
Yes. Yes. All the signatures look exactly the same. Everything on the card filled out looks just the same.
Ruth Ann, fraud?
We have no idea what the motive behind it is. It's just overwhelming to us.
Lou, I took a look at these registration forms, and indeed, they're all in the same hand. You can tell they're all written by the same person. They showed us the death certificates of some of these people who are registered there. The workers have been diligently trying to go through all these new ones, but finally they had to just put them aside. 2,100 of these applications are fraudulent. The other 2,900 have been placed to the side. They haven't even looked at them yet. They want to take care of the actual good applications of real new voters who really want to vote in this election. But they're scared. They're scared they don't know what's out there and who or what is going to show up at the polls when voting actually begins in those ballot boxes.
Drew, the woman with whom you were speaking, a terrific public servant, and we have got wonderful people like her all over the country. She seemed very sweet. She would not commit to the fact that somebody that writing in the same handwriting for thousands of times to register dead people would be committing fraud. But this, you've been looking into this story for days and days now. We're seeing it from Vegas to Ohio to Pennsylvania to Indiana, all over the country, and these investigations are opening up. How can there be any doubt about what's at work here?
You know, each individual county, Lou, and that's what's happening there. And let me tell you, Lake County, they are so afraid of anybody calling them partisan. For every worker, every job in that elections office, one person is a Republican, one is a Democrat. Both Republicans and Democrats are coming to me and saying, look, this is fraud. This is registration fraud. But each county has to look at it. And usually what happens is after the fact, after the election, the boards look at it, they file criminal charges, people are charged with these, but it takes years to get these charges filed and for any kind of actual convictions to come through, and that's too late.
Where is the Justice Department, and why is this being permitted to go on?
I think that's a very good question that I will ask the Justice Department tomorrow morning. But again, it's the jurisdiction of the local counties. It has to go through the legal process, you know. So that's what this board will recommend, a decision to the county attorney.
All right. Drew, thank you very much, as always. Outstanding reporting. Well, new evidence tonight that the Obama campaign is substantially connected to Acorn, despite disavowals from both Acorn and the Obama campaign. And new questions tonight as well about just how much money Acorn receives from the federal government. As Bill Tucker reports, some members of Congress are now calling for all federal funding of any part of Acorn to be halted.
House Republican leader John Boehner wants all federal funding to the Association of Community Organizations for Reform now, or ACORN, to end now. He's joining a chorus of Republican members who are furious over repeated charges of voter registration fraud against ACORN. Last month, 39 members of the House sent a letter to the Department of Justice asking the Attorney General to investigate ACORN.
We shouldn't be funding any political activity with taxpayer dollars. Jefferson said it was the essence of tyranny to force a man to contribute to a cause he doesn't believe in.
But when it comes to cutting off funding, there's a problem. Nobody has a handle on how much money ACORN receives from federal government sources.
I would absolutely say no. We do not have a handle on that. And the reason is, as I said a moment ago, is because ACORN is an umbrella organization of 75 different organizations, as I understand it. And so they have, if you want to use the word, tentacles out into all these. And in any piece of legislation, you will probably not see the word ACORN in it.
Representative Garrett says that within the federal rescue of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, there's a $500 million set aside for community organizations like the groups that make up ACORN. Financial Services Committee Chairman Barney Frank says no money goes to ACORN. And a spokesman for ACORN says it receives no money from federal sources, calling itself a, quote, nonprofit, nonpartisan social justice organization, which refuses to accept federal monies, saying funding comes from donations and membership fees. Opponents call that laughable, claiming that at least 40% of ACORN's funding is supplied by federal sources. And ACORN has been paid $800,000 by the Obama campaign to register voters. And there's another connection between ACORN and the Democratic presidential candidate Obama. Obama, along with the Department of Justice, represented the group in a lawsuit to force the state of Illinois to comply with motor voter legislation law.
So, again, to be clear, there is no question that the Obama campaign is paying ACORN for voter registration, and that now that ACORN is being charged with fraudulent registration, voter fraud, in effect, across a number of states all across the country.
That is absolutely correct.
And there is no federal investigation at this point. This is absolutely obscene and outrageous. Bill, thank you very much. Bill Tucker. Well, ACORN is under investigation for embezzlement and voter fraud, among other things. In at least 8 states, authorities are investigating ACORN's voter registration drives, and ACORN employees, some of them have been convicted of voter fraud. Former Ohio Secretary of State Ken Blackwell is calling for closer scrutiny of Senator Obama's connections to ACORN. The Obama campaign website, by the way, Fight the Smears, responded today by attacking Blackwell, saying, quote, Blackwell's attacks against ACORN and community organizers constitute a vile Republican pattern of mockery and viciousness against this noble profession. Community organizers are the very individuals Republicans should be celebrating for helping people help themselves rather than depending on the government. That gets a little complicated since ACORN is depending on, obviously, the government and political organizations. And after disavowing a relationship with ACORN, despite all of those investigations across 8 states right now into ACORN and voter fraud, the Obama campaign obviously supporting ACORN.
You know, from the United States Supreme Court ruling on voter ID, the justices found no substantial impairment of voting rights with the requirement of a photo ID. In fact, the justices found that the states had a rational and compelling interest to ensure the integrity of elections. It included a complaint by the liberals who said, well, if somebody doesn't have a driver's license or a birth certificate, they're going to have to get a birth certificate. And even though we provided free photo ID, we didn't provide free birth certificates. The United States Supreme Court said not a substantial impediment to the right to vote. All of the same arguments were the arguments made in the Wisconsin voter ID case before Judge David Flanagan in Dane County. And Flanagan said, well, you know, the state of Wisconsin holds voting rights to a much higher standard than the United States. Not exactly sure how, but we assume the state of Wisconsin holds voting rights in much higher esteem than the United States Constitution does. And so we believe that there isn't any compelling interest by the state or voters in the state to protect the integrity of elections. Now, mind you, this is a state that has just completed its 18th prosecution of felony voter fraud. There is an investigation of felony voter fraud going on as we speak, with subpoenas being delivered to the SEIU in Milwaukee County. This is a state that has never, ever resolved the problems of not getting absentee ballots to our military personnel serving overseas in time for them to have their votes counted. This is a state that does not get election integrity correct. This is a state that has illegal aliens on the voter registration lists. That's so bad, Senator Mary Lozick just demanded the GAB again purge the voting rolls. This is a state that has created the conditions where faking residency is easy. And all we wanted was a demand that individuals who are eligible to vote are the only people in Wisconsin elections who do vote. That's all we wanted. But the judge in Dane County, and that's the United States Supreme Court, said, we agree with you guys. That makes sense. These are not undue burdens. These are not poll taxes. But a judge in Dane County said, it is an undue burden on the right to vote and a substantial impediment.
The editors today try to argue we need to allow tech school IDs as a valid form of voter ID, and they sort of infer that if we don't, we're racists about it. I'll give you the highlights, and then you can call up and tell me why this is just silly, why we do not need to expand the number of valid IDs for voting to tech school IDs. 799-1130 is the number. But the Journal Sentinel editors write, some Republicans, such as State Senator Leah Vukmir and Representative Jim Ott, are okay with allowing University of Wisconsin system students to use their school identification cards to vote, but not with allowing tech college students to use their school IDs for the same purpose. On this question, those Republicans are flat out wrong. Tech college students shouldn't be treated as second-class citizens. Their school IDs should be just as valid as other Wisconsin colleges and universities. And while it may not be their intent, legislators who would block those IDs open themselves to accusations of trying to suppress the votes of each tech school students, many of whom are minorities. Do these legislators really want to go there, they ask? Of the 382,000 students in the tech school system, about 59,000 were minority students, they said, in 2009, 2020, 10. All right, of the 382,000 students in the tech school system, 59,000 were minority that year. Compare that to roughly 18,000 minority students in the UW system in the same school year. So they're arguing there were far more minority students at Milwaukee Tech than in the entire UW system. There are 21,000 MATC minority students that year, and there were only 18,000 in the entire UW system. So they say Ott and Vukmir argue that the intent of the photo ID bill is not to allow tech school IDs. Furthermore, they argue tech school students tend to be local kids with other forms of ID available to them, whereas many UW students live away from home and would be voting outside of their districts, their home districts. On the first point, as the Government Accountability Board said earlier this month, whatever the intent, the law is clear. The photo ID law says ID cards can be used for voting if they are, quote, issued by a university or college in this state that is accredited. Tech schools are colleges and are accredited. On the point of the technical college students having access to other IDs, many students, especially urban and especially minority, don't have driver's license or other IDs. They could get a state ID to vote, but why make it more difficult for them to vote than for UW students? So that is the editorial today in the Journal-Sentinel, saying it's just awful that we're not expanding the eligibility of what qualifies as an ID that you can use to vote to tech school IDs. 799-1130 is the telephone number. Go at it. What are some of the best arguments against the idea that we need to make tech school student IDs a valid form of ID? Because they say the Republicans are flat out wrong on this one. On this one, they are flat out wrong. The Journal-Sentinel editorial board is just flat out wrong. And once again, they fall into the liberal trap. They're trying to argue this from the issue of fairness. Well, UW schools are changing their IDs to comply. Why can't tech schools? Why shouldn't tech schools? UW IDs are going to be valid. Why shouldn't tech school IDs also be valid? Here we go again, falling into the fairness trap. Well, yeah, they could go and get a state ID at the DMV, they say, but why should they have to be, should it be more difficult for them to vote than a UW student? Really? You're going to argue fairness here? But there are about a dozen reasons that I can think of off the top of my head that tech school IDs do not need to be accepted here. And remember the intent of photo ID. The intent of the photo ID law is to protect the integrity of the electoral process. If you're going to do that, you can't have every card with a picture on it count as a valid form of ID. You have to limit it. We're limiting it to passports, driver's licenses, state-issued IDs, official documents. You can't just have anyone's well, here's a picture of me, duh, that counts too, which is apparently what the Democrats want to do. You need to put a limit on these things, and the legislature decided that tech school IDs were not going to be counted. And they have a rationale behind it, which this editorial totally misses. Maurice in Winthrop Harbor, you're on WISN. Good morning.
Yes, I am so tired of these liberal editors being the most condescending racists that I've ever seen. Exactly, it's what they're doing is they're treating blacks like they're already second-class citizens by saying that that we cannot get a voter ID. I'm African American, and I got my voter ID or just ID when I was 16 years old. Although I don't know if I could vote then, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Basically, it's ridiculous for them to treat us differently than whites, and they're perpetuating a dysfunctional mentality that we are different. And that's not right at all. And they're the ones being the racist.
You stole a lot of my thunder, but good for you. First of all, we have to dispel this notion that most urban black Milwaukee is walking around without a driver's license or an ID in their pocket. That's ridiculous. But then more than that, you really hit on the fact that this is so condescending and so racist to suggest that anyone who has a darker skin color can't fend for themselves, can't figure out how to find a DMV, can't figure out how to, they don't drive, they must take buses. I don't know. I mean, it's such a condescending argument that they make here.
It is.
And you're right. And I wish that there were more minorities like yourself who would stand up and go, hey, we're not idiots. we do okay for ourselves. We can. It just drives me crazy. Thanks, Maurice. This is the most condescending argument that could possibly be made for why tech school IDs need to be counted. Well, a good number of people who go to tech schools are a minority, and they can't take care of themselves. Well, they're going to school. They're getting an education. They're going to be productive members of society. Oh, no. We can't ask them to fend for themselves on this. It is a racist argument, as Maurice pointed out.
Republicans. Andre Walker and Ashley Bell are here with us now. They start with the simple question: why?
Well, I'll tell you, John, this is a decision that my family and I had to come up to. 6 or 7 months ago, we decided that we had to take a close look at where the Democratic Party was going. I'm an elected official. I represent a district that was carried strongly by John McCain. I only have about 20 to 25% African-American vote. My district's already pretty conservative. I've been a conservative Democrat my entire life. But when I looked at the party, and after this last election, we realized there were no conservatives left in the Democratic Party.
State party or national party or both?
Let's just say both. Both, I would say, it's pretty fair to say that if you're a conservative, you've been put on the outside of the Democratic Party. So when I had to make a choice, would I rather be in a party where I can rally the base, would I rather be in a party that really questions a lot of my stances on where I am? So I'd rather be in a party that's more comfortable.
So answer the critic who says this is opportunistic, that you have a Republican wave. The Republicans clearly in the state of Georgia and across the country are making gains. And what better way to get some headlines and a higher profile than for an African-American Democrat to say, I switch?
That's just not the case in my case, because I'm not an elected official. I don't have a seat to protect. I don't have a seat at all. I'm just a regular citizen. I run a political blog, and I decided to switch over to the Republican Party purely for ideological reasons. I felt in my gut that it was time to go.
What kind of a test do you have for the Republican Party? If you go back to the last two presidential elections, it's 9 or 8 or 10% African-American vote for the Republican Party. Do you have a test now that you're in the Republican Party and say, you guys better listen? Andre?
I don't think there is a test. I think that when it all boils down to it, issues such as keeping taxes low, reducing the size of government, making government more efficient, I think that resonates across the board, regardless of what folks look like.
John, the issue is that
Welcome back, everyone. Our next guest says he was proud to be a Democrat, but now after serving 7 years on the left, he's changing colors to see red. So why the change? Joining me now is former Alabama Congressman Artur Davis. Good morning to you, Congressman.
Good morning to you. Good morning to your audience.
Thank you so much. Now, I know that you moved from Alabama. Your home is now Virginia. And you're
a couple of years ago.
You're considering making a run in Virginia, but you're going to run as a Republican. Why?
Well, when you're out of office, first of all, I'm nowhere near deciding to run for office, but when you're out of office, you do get a chance to think about the direction of the country. You don't have to worry about what a party is saying or worry about what will get you votes. You have a chance to really think and reflect. Mm-hmm. And in the last 2 years, I've looked at the fact that we're losing ground in this country economically. Every time we think we're beginning to move forward, we fall backwards. We're more divided now than we were 4 years ago. Our school systems aren't working. A lot of the policies that have been put in place in the last several years have been counterproductive. Our businesses don't have an environment where they think they can create jobs, and I could go on. Mm-hmm. What we're doing is not working. And I finally took inventory, and it's not a decision I lightly made or one I just woke up and made one morning, but I took inventory over the last couple of years, and I decided that on the things that I care most about, on the things that are most important to this country, that my views are more in line with the R side than the D side at this point.
So it's very interesting because I think our viewers will hear you say once you were out of politics, you felt like you could really examine it and say what you thought. And I think that's what a lot of people have a problem with regard to politicians in this day and age. Having said that, I know that there's 3 topics that seem to be at the top of your list. You believe that this whole sort of fight about private equity, that we shouldn't be punishing the job creators, correct?
Well, I've said for a very long time that capitalism is not always pretty. Sometimes free markets aren't always pretty, but you know what? They beat every other system in the world. And I think most people in this country, when they get up in the morning, they actually have ambitions, they have aspirations, they want to be successful.
Right.
And many of the guys and ladies who are out there involved in the private equity market, the hedge fund market, they're people who started lower middle class, they're people who started very poor, and they have lived the American dream in their lives just like I've had a chance to live it in my life.
Right.
And those individuals don't want to be torn down. They don't want to be marginalized. They don't want to be ridiculed. They want to have an opportunity to be celebrated for the good they're doing in this country. But, of course, it's a broader question. I supported President Obama 4 years ago because I wanted to see this country come together. I wanted us to change the way we talked to each other and the way we thought about each other. Unfortunately, we've gone backwards on both fronts in the last several years. And frankly, 4 years ago, that was President Obama's main offer to the American people. He didn't have a lengthy resume or a lengthy record, and he admitted that.
Right.
His main promise to the American people was, I'll bring us together,
Right.
I'll get us past being red and blue, and we've gone backwards and not forwards on that count.
All right. Artur Davis, the former Democratic congressman from Alabama, who has decided to switch parties and may run in Virginia in the future. Thanks for your time this morning, sir. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Hey YouTube, it's Chiefy Lone Guy. It's August 2nd, 2012. I came across this article. I wanted to share it with you in case you haven't heard about this yet. Obama campaign sues to restrict military voting. President Barack Obama, along with many Democrats, likes to say that while they may disagree with the GOP on many issues related to national security, they absolutely share their admiration and dedication to the members of our armed forces. Obama, in particular, enjoys being seen visiting troops and having photos taken with members of our military. So why is his campaign and the Democrat Party suing to restrict their ability to vote in the upcoming election? What's up with that? On July 17th, the Obama for America campaign, the Democratic National Committee, and the Ohio Democratic Party filed suit in Ohio to strike down part of that state's law governing voting by members of the military. Their suit said that that part of the law is, quote, arbitrary, with, quote, no discernible rational basis. Right, there's no discernible rational basis to let the military vote in this upcoming election. Why would we want to do that? That makes no sense at all. Currently, Ohio allows the public to vote early in person up till Friday before the election. Members of the military are given 3 extra days to do so. While the Democrats may see this as arbitrary and having no discernible rational basis, I think it's entirely reasonable given the demands on the servicemen and women and their time and obligation to their sworn duty. The National Defense Committee reports for each of the last 3 years, the Department of Defense's Federal Voting Assistance Program has reported to the President and the Congress that the #1 reason for military voter disenfranchisement is inadequate time to successfully vote. Don't you guys realize that Obama knows this? He just wants to shut out a few of the people that are clearly not going to vote for him. I think it's unconscionable that we as a nation wouldn't make it easy as possible for members of the military to vote. They arguably have more right to vote than the rest of us, since it's their service and sacrifice that ensures that we have the right to vote in the first place. If anyone proposes legislation to combat voter fraud, Democrats will loudly scream, that proposal could disenfranchise some voters somewhere. Yeah, it's going to disenfranchise somebody. We don't want you to have to show an ID. Then people can't vote. Well, if you don't have an ID, maybe you shouldn't be voting, huh? All right. We must ensure, they argue, that voting is easy and accessible to every single voter that's going to vote Democrat. But military people who we know are going to generally vote conservative, we don't want them to be able to vote. We just want other people, especially people without a license, illegals. We want them to be able to vote, but not the military. No, not the military. Obama, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'm ashamed for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Acorn whistleblower, Miss Anita Moncrief.
Thank you, and thank you for coming out. Can everyone hear me okay? First, I'd like to say good morning. I know it's a bright and early morning, but I'm glad you all made it out here today. And some of you may have heard the story, but I wanted to talk about a little bit about how I got here. Because as I tell people all the time, I never thought, if you had told me 3 to 4 years ago that I would be addressing conservatives across the country, I probably would have thought you were a little crazy. But here I am, so I want to tell you that story and how I got to where I am now. And it starts a little bit back further than you think. In December of 2001, I had gone to D.C. for the very first time. I was young and idealistic, and I was going to work with the American Bar Association. I came up there as an unpaid intern, and I was working in Northwest D.C., so I would have these wonderful lunches with lawyers from across the country, $300 lunches, and then I would go home to Southeast D.C. I don't know how many of you guys have ever been to Southeast D.C., but this is not what you see on the tour. This is like you go down Pennsylvania, go across the bridge, and it's totally different. So I got to see the extreme differences between rich and poor. And coming from Alabama, I never really had a lot of money, but urban poverty is totally different than it is in the South. We always seem to get by, but in the up north, it was really extreme. So instead of focusing on international affairs with the ABA, after my internship, I figured that I wanted to help people in my own backyard. So I started looking around. And before the embezzlement scandal and everything else, Acorn seemed like a really great organization. You go to their website and it's all these pictures of people smiling and folks helping out in the community, picking up trash, putting stop signs, and they talked about giving people a voice for the very first time. So I thought, okay, this is something I want to do. I want to work hands-on for the community. So in October of 2005, I came back from Birmingham, Alabama to D.C. for the very last time to work with Acorn National, which was Acorn Political Operations, and their sister organization, Project Vote. If you guys haven't heard of Project Vote, how many of you have? Good. That's Acorn's voter registration arm. It's also the organization that Obama worked for in the 90s. They are a 501c3 nonprofit, and they were paying my salary, but a lot of the work that I was doing was coming from Acorn. So one of my first tasks when I got there was to investigate the 2004 voter registration fraud allegations. As you guys may remember, there was a huge, and I mean huge, anti-Bush sentiment on the left. Soros had spent millions of dollars on ad campaigns and websites and groups and everything else he could get out there to defeat Bush and get Kerry elected. So out of that came voter registration fraud allegations across the country, from Missouri to Florida to Georgia, Pennsylvania, everywhere. And it was my job to investigate these incidents and put them together in some type of form that the organization could use to defend itself. The only problem was, no matter where I looked, if it was in Missouri or Pennsylvania or wherever, it seemed that all the employees were doing the same thing. It was almost as if they had been trained that way. Yeah, right? So I took this information to my supervisors, and they were very quick to tell me, no, it's just a couple of bad apples, one rogue employee that's defrauding the organization. It's not us. And so I'm looking at the facts here and knowing that people are going to jail every election cycle. And Acorn did this on purpose. They didn't hire you to run voter registration drives. They would go out there and they'd find ex-crackheads and ex-junkies and con men and whoever. And then when everything would hit the fan, they'd go, see, this is a pattern of behavior. These people are bad people. They defrauded us. And those people would go to jail, and Acorn would get off scot-free, free to do it another election cycle. And being there, when you start off at Acorn, you come in, you're young and you're idealistic and you want to help people, but along the way, you have to start looking the other way at things. You see things that are going on, and for the good of the movement, you ignore them. Or when they do things that are outright socialist, you don't use the term socialism. You just think what's fair is fair and what's right is right, and we're trying to right the wrongs, and it's all about the good of the people. So it's all about the collective good. It's not about the bad things you're doing, because in the end, end justifies the means. So that's where I was, and I was looking at all of these things, and I ignored it, even though I knew that those people were going to go to jail. The end goal was that Acorn registered 1.3 million people that cycle, and those people were on the rolls, and they were not being disenfranchised. And just to give you a little bit of background about the organization, when Wade Rathke started Acorn back in the 70s, he didn't start it to help people. One of the things that people don't realize is they think that Acorn was a great organization that got corrupt along the way. Unfortunately, its founders, they were always had socialist intentions. What happened is that they were working with the heirs of the world, and they got tired of their people getting on the FBI list for blowing up buildings and stuff. So they decided that the best way to win was to assimilate into American society. So I tell people this: they went into the nonprofit world. They went into academia, which is why we have so many liberal professors, and in some cases they even went into the Republican Party so they could claim bipartisanship, which is how a lot of these groups get funded in years when Republicans have power. So there we were looking at people that had been there for almost 30 years running an organization, and they were at what Zach Paulette liked to call, Zach Paulette was the executive director of Acorn and Project Vote simultaneously. In 2008, he said we had a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and it wasn't to elect a black president, it was to pass socialism, to fundamentally change the way we were doing things, and Barack Obama was just a conduit to do it. And to get back on that, let's talk about where that was. In 2007, I was sitting at a meeting of Acorn national staff from across the country in Little Rock, Arkansas. And Zach Paulette got up in front of the group, and he told us that he had supervised Barack Obama in the 90s, and that Acorn produces leaders. He was telling us right then and there that we, as community organizers, could be the next president of the United States. And then we began to put together what I always like to call Acorn's socialist wish list. And I'm pretty sure you already know what was on that: cap and trade, universal health care, forced unionism through card check, and a host of other environmental justice issues that would basically give the EPA just carte blanche. So we sat there and put that together, and they were going to pass that within the first few months of Obama's term. So I was, so when I got a call 2 weeks later from the Obama campaign to the Washington D.C. office, I was actually very excited. You know, this Obama campaign is calling Acorn. So I get out there and I type a little email and I send it out to all my supervisors. And what I got back from that email, which I was told I probably shouldn't have sent, was a USB drive about this big. And on that USB drive was the second quarter Obama donor list from 2007. Now, if you guys remember, there was a big thing about this because Obama would not turn over his lower dollar donors. Anyone under $200 he refused to turn over to the FEC, but he gave this list to Acorn. And it was my job to go on there and contact the maxed out presidential donors and to tell them that even though they had maxed out, they could give to Acorn and Acorn would get Obama elected. Exactly. And this is when I started really having a problem because I wanted Obama to win. I wanted the Democrats to win, but we were cheating. And I thought, if we were cheating, are we really winning? So in 2007, I contacted Brett Jacobson over at the Employment Policies Institute. He's now a writer at breitbartsbiggovernment.com, but this was my first time ever talking to anyone on the right. And I expected him to immediately, pump me for information. And instead he said, this was in 2007, I had just had a daughter, and he told me, he's like, going up against Acorn is very difficult from the inside. If you ever get away from the organization, give me a call and we will sit down and talk about this. Now, I was completely surprised because I'm thinking they're just gonna start, oh, what do you know, and pumping me for information. But it also gave me a little bit of confidence because I realized there were people that were willing to help me. So I decided to try to change the Acorn from the inside. Now, at our next meeting, it was December of 2007, so I got up with this new courage and I was like, you know what? We should really start reaching out to the middle class. And they looked at me and they was like, that's a great idea, Anita. Why don't you write something up and send it to us? And I think I actually got put on what would be called the Acorn watch list after that one. Because what I realized is that they did not want to reach out to the middle class. They didn't want people like you and you in the organization, because as Michelle Malkin always says, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So when you have, yes, and when you have people paying attention, they can't do those type of subversive activities because they're not going to fly. So not realizing it, I think Acorn started to realize at the same time I did that I really wasn't a fit for that organization. And that's why in July of 2008, now how many of you guys heard about the embezzlement scandal with Acorn? Good. His brother embezzled over $1 million, sometimes people say more. And the New York Times broke the story. And as anybody will tell you, before that time, no one was covering stuff about Acorn. If you tried to go up against them, they were going to squash you like a bug. They had tried, other employees that were organizers had tried before, and they had been sued and silenced. But this time we had a mainstream media outlet paying attention. So I contacted Stephanie Strom of the New York Times as a confidential source. And I began to give her documents and records and emails and everything she would need to show that not only was Acorn committing massive voter registration fraud, but they also had done things that would constitute prosecution under the RICO statutes. But every time, if you go back and you look up Stephanie Strom's articles from summer of 2008, every single article was more watered down than the next. It almost seemed like they were trying to provide cover for Acorn. So I started not to trust her a little bit. From July of 2008 to October of 2008, none of those stories ever got printed the way they were. So being a liberal, this is the old gray lady now. What are you going to do when the old gray lady is not listening to you? I started looking around, like, who's getting it, who's getting it? And so I contacted Michelle Malkin. Now, yes. Now, this was a big step for me, because if you guys, being a liberal and reading Michelle Malkin's blog can make your head explode. So she kind of terrified me a little bit, but that was like my, just in case things don't go well, I could have that, there. So I contacted her and I sent her an email just to let her know what was going on. But at the same time, I was still working with Strom. So on October 23rd, 2008, after working from July to October, I was at home with my daughter, who was 2 at the time. She got into my makeup. So I immediately picked her up and was dropping her in the tub and scrubbing her, and I heard my phone ring. Usually when Stephanie calls, I automatically pick up. But this time, because I was in the bathroom with my daughter, I let it go to voicemail. When I went back and I played that voicemail, it was Stephanie Strom telling me that her editors had told her to stand down from the story. She was coming to D.C. that day, 2 days from that day, to get information regarding the Obama donor list, collusion between the campaign, Acorn, and Project Vote, and she had independently verified meetings between the campaign and Project Vote outside of myself. So I called her back, and she told me that it was not the policy of the New York Times to print a game changer that close to the election for either side. Exactly. And if you remember, they printed a story about John McCain having an affair with an anonymous source. And there I was, willing to come forward, be identified, and they had a list that they could prove could not have been downloaded from the internet because it included donors that Obama had never turned over to the FEC. So I went to CNN. They did a 3-tape interview that never aired. ABC News and Martha Raddatz had the story and was able to prove the validity of the list, and they would not touch it. Everyone provided cover for Obama before the election. The only people that would cover the story was Fox News. Honestly, that's where programming comes in. That's how good the liberals are. Because I was terrified of Fox News. I thought, okay, they finally found that one black person that's going to come on TV against Obama, and they're going to put me in a loop like this before election, so I wouldn't go anywhere near them. I was scared they were going to use me, and they weren't going to tell the real story. Because keep in mind, I was still a liberal at this point. So I wanted to expose Acorn so Obama could do his job. And I still voted for him, thinking that he was a great guy. That's how idealistic I was. But at the time, I said no, I would not go to New York. I wouldn't talk to them. I did do an interview with Laura Ingraham, and I was surprised because I thought she was going to be evil. Once again, when you're on the left and all of your friends are leftists and your parents are leftists, you don't hang around with other people, and you only get the view of folks as what you see on TV and how they present it to you. And you guys are seen as racist, angry people. Every time they get a chance, that's the image that they push out there on TV. They try to find the one crazy Tea Party person, get them to say something stupid, and then they make sure that they play it on the black stations, and you see that, and you're thinking, okay, these people are nuts. So I didn't expect any type of support to come from the right, which was kind of stupid because I should have realized that while all of these liberals were covering and carrying water for Obama, they were the only ones willing to actually get the story out there. So, and if you go to my blog, I had a blog I wrote around that time, you can actually see the thought progression from liberal to conservative. But I wrote this great blog about going to vote for Obama on election day with my daughter and how America was, finally coming together. And all of that idealism lasted until about January of 2009. Now, being an insider, I had worked with an organization called American Rights at Work. American Rights at Work is a pro-union organization funded by SEIU whose main job is to pass card check. Hilda Solis was the treasurer of American Rights at Work. So when I saw her picked as labor secretary, I knew why. It was to pass card check. Kathleen Sebelius, when she was the governor of Kansas, she took the state of Kansas plane to D.C. to accept an award from Andy Stern and American Rights at Work and to plot how she was going to pass universal health care. Leon Panetta has obvious Acorn and socialist ties. So I started to think, if everyone around you is corrupt, how can you be a good guy? I realized that Obama wasn't, basically being railroaded by these socialists. He was a socialist. And that's when I said, that's when I said, you know what, I'm through, I'm done. And not to offend anyone, I didn't want to be a Republican, but I knew I didn't want to be a liberal anymore, so I became an ex-liberal. And I'm going to talk about this a little later with Alice Lanahan at our session, but that's where the power of social media comes in. Because like I said, everyone around me had always been a leftist. In my house, the two pictures on the wall were Jesus and JFK. We were very staunch Democrats. All my friends were Democrats. So thinking that you guys would think I was funny and actually we'd have anything in common was very foreign to me. And that's where Twitter and Facebook came in. I'm sitting there and I'm writing about Acorn and corruption, and I'm realizing people are retweeting my stuff and they're putting LOL, and I'm like, they think I'm funny? I didn't, It was so weird and alien to me, but I started making relationships. I started working with Smart Girl Politics and the Patriot Caucus, and there were just so many different groups that came out in 2009 that I got involved with, and I started realizing that all of that programming and racism was coming from the left. Thank you. And just to wrap up, I just want to let you know that's something that most people don't see. When you change your thought process, that's when that happens. When I spoke with the CPAC, on the CPAC main stage in 2010, I came home and on my blog were all these comments, and one of them, this guy said, I never saw a coon at a Klan party until I saw you on the CPAC stage. So they're calling you racist, but this is the type of stuff they're writing to me because I changed my mind, because I think differently than them. So that's why I want to let you know we do have the fight of our lives ahead of us, because they are worried about other people that are coming out of the fold, that are waking up and realizing that this hope and change was a bill of goods that they sold us that was kind of bad. So we have an opportunity now that we have never had before, because in the black community, they are ready for someone to come in and tell them the truth, but they're whispering it to each other. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for coming out today.
So there you have it, folks. The liberal Democrats are seeking to prepare the conditions of voter fraud in all 50 states.
Democrats are so quick to pump disinformation about how requiring a photo ID suppresses and disenfranchises their voters. However, the only votes disqualified would be the fraudulent ones. Liberal Democrats are only upset because they're hindered from cheating like they usually do. You see, the Democrat Party is organized crime. And now we all know that well over 70% of Democrats in leadership are socialists or are affiliated with the Communist Party. President Barack Obama happens to be one of them. Obama is destroying the American economy on purpose in order to get as many people as he can dependent on the federal government programs where the simple-minded will be scared into voting for him because the Democrats will create lies and media scams just before the election cycle, how their political opponents will supposedly take away their free handouts, just like the socialist dictators would say in the past as they bankrupt their own nations. All of Obama's jobs programs are marred in fraud, scandal, and corruption that use U.S. taxpayer dollars to fund Obama's so-called green energy jobs that only added jobs overseas, made Obama's campaign donors richer, or that shifted those taxpayer funds back into the corrupt Democrat Party machine for re-election slush funds. The Democrat Party has become the most corrupt political organization in the history of America, and voter fraud deception is the Democrat way of staying in power. Democrat leaders will try to keep us blacks and Hispanics in dysfunctional programs that are all designed to fail. Their goal is to keep us blacks and Hispanics in such a state of dysfunction that they become deceived by the idea that federal government is only there to take care of us, as they keep as many people as possible uneducated and unaware so that they are locked into a system of dependence so that we will vote Democrat like slaves, serving on their modern-day plantations. Speaking of voter fraud, look at Obama's fraud-failed green energy policies and look at the companies that failed. And the Obama administration wants us to give him 4 more years. These were companies that were supposed to bring in American jobs, but they haven't. These are the failed energy companies. Solar Trust of America, failure. Bright Source, fail. Solyndra, failure. LSP Energy, fail. Energy conversion devices, fail. Abound Energy Solar, fail. SunPower, fail. Beacon Power, fail. Ecotality, fail. A123 Solar, fail. Unisolar, Azure Dynamics, Evergreen Solar, and Inter1. These are examples of failed government companies. When government gets involved with business, it's marked with failure. And he used taxpayer dollars, spent billions and billions of dollars to create these businesses that he gave to his friends. And these companies all went bankrupt. And Obama has created more jobs overseas for other nations than within the United States itself.
It's here that companies like Solyndra are leading the way.
The Recovery Act is helping to create long-term manufacturing jobs that will help ensure America's leadership for the 21st century.
So what we do in this whole factory is we take glass tubing and we turn them into solar cells.
You know, look at Solyndra, unlimited money. Just throw money at Solyndra. It doesn't matter if it works or not. It's crony capitalism. They don't have near the same concerns. And the Solyndra story is from CBS San Francisco after filing for bankruptcy last year. Fremont Solar Company Solyndra still owes American taxpayers $500 million, but Channel 5 San Francisco caught them destroying millions of dollars worth of parts.
Good evening, I'm Ken Bastida.
I'm Dana King. Tonight, a CBS 5 exclusive. Remember Solyndra, the failed solar company in Fremont?
Well, Solyndra still owes American taxpayers $500 million, but we caught them destroying millions of dollars worth of parts. Elizabeth Cook with the video you'll see only on CBS 5.
Well, Solyndra will put its assets up for sale again next month, at least the assets they haven't yet destroyed. Look at what we found last week. At Solyndra's sprawling complex in Fremont, workers in white jumpsuits unwrap brand new glass tubes used in solar panels. They are the latest, most cutting-edge solar technology, and they're being tossed into dumpsters. Forklifts bring one pallet after another piled high with the carefully packaged glass. Slowly but surely, it all ends up shattered. We're not talking a few loads. Hundreds of thousands of tubes on shrink-wrapped pallets will meet a similar demise. Solyndra paid at least $2 million for the specialized glass. We found this piece lying in the parking lot, and Solyndra still owes the German company that made these another $8 million. So why would a bankrupt company that owes a fortune to creditors, including U.S. taxpayers, be throwing away millions of dollars worth of assets?
And they're throwing the stuff away with the imprimatur of Obama, with the approval of Obama. Just throw them away. It doesn't matter, even though they owe the money. They're in bankruptcy. They've got to pay things back. They're throwing the stuff away. Nothing like that could happen in the private sector.
For more on the tax cut debate and outsourcing and a lot of other issues, I'm joined by former New Hampshire Governor, former Chief of Staff John Sununu, a surrogate, of course, for the Romney campaign. Governor, it's great to see you again.
Nice to talk to you, Andrea. How have you been?
I've been very well, thank you. But here we are. It's 47-47. It doesn't look as though either of them are moving the needle. But Mitt Romney today, you just saw in Colorado, which is one of the important battleground states, making the point that President Obama has an outsourcing problem.
Yeah, he does. And the outsourcing issue really causes two problems for President Obama. One, it underscores his dishonesty. The ad they were running, which all the independent fact-checking groups have said is dishonest, ends with President Obama saying, "I'm President Obama and I approve this message." It should say, "I'm President Obama, I approve this dishonest message." And the second problem he has with outsourcing is that there is a huge amount of outsourcing which was driven by Obama policy. The money, the $500 million they gave to Fisker created jobs in Finland. The solar energy grants they gave and created jobs in Mexico. The wind turbine grants they gave created jobs in Denmark. So the point that I think is really interesting is that the outsourcing issue underscores how few smarts there are in this White House and in this Obama campaign, that they expose themselves to the response criticism that I think, unlike what Mr. Solicitor said, is going to end up making this a winning issue for Mitt Romney.
But isn't it a winning issue for the White House fundamentally? Granted that the PolitiFact folks and the Washington Post pointed out that the president's campaign ad on that issue had a lot of questions and a lot of questionable attack lines.
No, they said it was wrong. A lot of questions is not right. It was wrong.
Okay. But the point is that isn't Mitt Romney more vulnerable than the president on this issue? Because there still is the whole question of private equity, of outsourcing. You can argue about when he left Bain Capital and whether he was still getting money from Bain Capital and what some of the companies in Bain were doing, companies that did end up working overseas and sending jobs overseas. But isn't it a bigger problem for Republicans than for the White House?
No. When you said $500 million to Fisker and it goes to Finland immediately, when you send the solar money and it goes to Mexico, when you send the turbine money and it goes to Denmark, and we can go on all day, there's $29 billion worth of purchases that came out of this administration, outsourced jobs to foreign countries. Mitt Romney outsourced zero. Obama outsourced 29. Zero. He wasn't there when those issues came up.
Well, first of all, the $29 billion are not all outsourced from the administration, because
sure they are.
A lot of those jobs still remained here. There are jobs when you do a grant, Governor, there are jobs here as well as overseas.
You're struggling, Andrea. You're struggling.
Well, first of all, these are competing claims, and we will get back to you with all of the numbers. But the point is,
let's talk about the 3% you brought up. You want to talk numbers?
Let's talk about the Joint Committee on Taxation and Glenn Kessler in the Washington Post.
But that 3% represents the group of small businesses that create the bulk of the jobs under small businesses. They're the larger ones. So they don't create 3% of the jobs. It means 3% of the small businesses, which create the majority of the jobs. So give all the numbers. That's not what the
Joint Committee on Taxation
said,
it is.
Sir. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. They create most of the jobs involved.
That is not what Glenn Kessler with the Washington Post or the Joint Committee on Taxation said. They said that only 3% of the small businesses are correctly categorized as small businesses and are affected by this tax proposal.
That's right, but they are the bigger ones, and it's the bigger ones that create most of the jobs.
And the other point that gets lost in all of this is that even the millionaires get a tax cut up to $250,000.
You know, it's interesting that the president, again, chooses to demonstrate why he has ruined this economy. He doesn't understand why he is behind the 8 ball with 8.2% unemployment. He's behind the 8 ball because those people who invest in jobs, that want to put money in to create jobs, look at this administration and are scared to death of things like this tax and like overregulation. All he's done with what he put out yesterday is convince them that if Obama is elected, they're taking their investment money out of the country.
Governor, if you believe that tax cuts are good for the economy, why not go along with what the president suggested and why aren't Republicans supporting a tax cut for the 250,000 people and less, and then come back after the election and deal with the millionaire issue?
Well, the question is why aren't the Republicans is not why the Republicans aren't supporting that. It's why all those Democratic senators are opposing President Obama. Senator McCaskill, Tester, Conrad, there's about a half a dozen to a dozen Democrats in the Senate who will oppose this foolishness from the president. There's about 5 handfuls of Democratic representatives in the House who will oppose this foolishness.
Well, you're talking,
he's going to look just as bad.
We're going to address because you're talking clearly about Tester McCaskill, Ben Nelson. You're talking about, or Bill Nelson rather, in Florida. You're talking about senators in close races who are clearly not going to support what the president is doing here.
Well, he's doing to his Democratic Party what he did when he sent up a budget and lost in the House by 414 to nothing, and in the Senate 98 to nothing. All he cares about is himself. He doesn't care about the people that support him politically. And frankly, I think this is just a repetition of a desperate act by a president who wants to create class warfare. It's why he's going to lose.
To be continued. Always a pleasure to see you, Governor.
Thank you, Andrea.
Very much.
Best to you.